Ethan Collins, a very wealthy and lonely executive, invites Sophia Bombs, a taxi driver, to Christmas Eve dinner at his grandmother's house, Cynthia Collins. And no one could believe it when... What happens when two completely opposite worlds collide on Christmas Eve? You won't believe it until you see the ending. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Ethan Collins stepped out of the lavish gala, his tailored suit clinging to him like a second skin. The cold, crisp air of Christmas Eve enveloped him, a stark contrast to the warmth of the celebration he had just left. The light from the ornate chandeliers faded behind him, replaced by the twinkling lights that decorated the city streets. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses faded into the background, leaving him in a bubble of solitude. As he walked down the sidewalk, he couldn't shake the feeling of discontent that settled in his chest. He hailed a taxi, the familiar yellow vehicle pulling up to the curb with a swish of tire and snow. Ethan slid into the back seat, the warmth of the car providing a brief reprieve from the winter chill. "Where to?" the driver asked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Just take me home," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with thoughts. He leaned back against the seat, staring out the window as the city zipped by. The festive decorations seemed to mock him, each twinkling light a reminder of the joy that felt so distant. He thought of his family's expectations, the perfect son, the successful executive, and the weight of it all pressed down on him. As they drove through the bustling streets, he couldn't help but reflect on the evening's events. The gala had been a parade of superficial conversations, filled with empty pleasantries and business talk. He had mingled with his peers, smiled for the cameras, and exchanged hollow compliments, all while feeling increasingly disconnected from the very world he belonged to. He sighed, wishing he could shake off the expectations that bound him. The driver's voice broke through his thoughts. "You don't look too excited about Christmas, buddy. Something on your mind?" Ethan turned his gaze from the window, meeting the driver's eyes in the mirror. She was a woman in her 30s, with a warm smile and a sparkle of mischief in her eyes that contrasted sharply with Ethan's somber mood. "Just family stuff," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know how it is. Family, huh? Always complicated, isn't it?" she replied, a knowing nod following her words. "But Christmas is supposed to be a time for joy. Do you like Christmas?" Ethan hesitated, the question catching him off guard. "I used to," he finally said, his voice laced with nostalgia. "But lately, it feels more like a chore." "Well, that's a shame," she said, her tone playful. "I love Christmas. The lights, the music, the food. It's all just magical to me. I've got my daughter to thank for that, I guess. She makes everything feel special." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You have a daughter?" "Yup. Her name's Mia, and she's 6 going on 16, the driver chuckled. "She's got this infectious spirit. We bake cookies, decorate the tree, and listen to Christmas carols all day long. It's hard not to feel cheerful with her around." Ethan couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "Sounds like you have a lot of fun together." "Oh, we do. But it's not all sugar plums and candy canes," she added, her tone shifting slightly. "Being a single mom is tough. I work long hours as a taxi driver to make ends meet, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Mia is my reason to keep going." He observed her, noticing the strength behind her words. There was a resilience in her spirit that captivated him. "What's it like driving a taxi on Christmas Eve?" he asked, genuinely curious. "It's busy, but it's also one of the best nights to drive. Everyone is in a good mood, heading to parties or family gatherings. I get to hear so many stories," she replied, her eyes bright with excitement. "And the tips are usually better, too. It's the little things, you know?" Ethan nodded, lost in thought. He admired her determination and the joy she found in simple moments. "I guess I've lost sight of that," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well, you should try to find it again," she said, her tone encouraging. "Life's too short to get bogged down by all the stress. You have to hold on to what really matters." He found himself reflecting on her words. She was right. He had allowed the pressures of his career and family expectations to overshadow the simple joys of life. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time that evening, he felt a flicker of warmth in his heart. As they drove through the city, the streets illuminated by festive lights, Ethan caught a glimpse of the joy that seemed to radiate from the driver. He watched as she hummed along to the Christmas carols playing softly on the radio, her spirit infectious. "What's your name, by the way?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Sophia," she said, glancing back at him with a bright smile. "Sophia Bombs. And you?" "Ethan Collins," he replied, extending his hand through the space between the seats. She shook it firmly, a gesture that felt unexpectedly personal. "Nice to meet you, Ethan," she said, her eyes sparkling. "So, what are your plans for tonight? Going home to the family?" "Something like that," he said, his expression turning serious again. "I have a family dinner to attend. It's important to them." "Sounds like a big deal," Sophia noted, her tone shifting to one of understanding. "Family traditions can be tough, especially if you don't feel like you fit in." "You could say that," he replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "There's always this pressure to be perfect, to live up to their expectations." Sophia nodded knowingly, her expression empathetic. "I get it, but you don't have to conform to what others want. You can carve your own path, especially during the holidays." Ethan felt a surge of inspiration from her words. There was a freedom in her outlook that he longed for. In that moment, he made an impulsive decision that surprised even himself. "Would you like to join me for dinner? My family would love to meet you." Sophia blinked, taken aback by the sudden invitation. "Me? At your family dinner? Are you sure?" "Yeah, why not? It might be fun. You can bring some of that Christmas spirit you've been talking about," he said, a smile creeping onto his face. She hesitated for a moment, weighing the offer. "I don't want to impose on your family. It's a special night for you." "It's also a special night for you," Ethan insisted, his voice firm yet inviting. "Besides, I think you'd bring a fresh perspective to the table. My family could use that." Sophia smiled, a hint of excitement flickering in her eyes. "Well, if you insist, I'd love to join. Just give me a moment to drop off my last fare, and I'll meet you wherever you need me." "Great," Ethan replied, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had no idea what his family would think of this spontaneous decision, but in that moment, it felt right. As the taxi navigated through the city, he felt a shift within himself, a spark of hope ignited by an unexpected connection on a night meant for celebration. As the taxi pulled up to the grand entrance of Cynthia Collins's mansion, Ethan Collins felt his heart pound in his chest. The imposing structure, adorned with twinkling lights and garlands, stood as a testament to his family's wealth and status. It was a place where expectations loomed large, and he could already feel the weight of his family's scrutiny bearing down on him. The warm glow of the interior spilled out onto the driveway, inviting yet intimidating, a stark contrast to the chilly air of Christmas Eve. Ethan took a deep breath, glancing at Sophia Bombs, who was staring wide-eyed at the mansion. Her expression was a mix of awe and apprehension, and he felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. Despite their contrasting worlds, there was something about her spirit that ignited a sense of hope within him. "Are you ready?" he asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Sophia turned to him, her eyes bright beneath the soft glow of the mansion's lights. "I think so. It's just, this place is incredible. I've never been anywhere like it." With a reassuring smile, he nodded. "Just be yourself. My family can be a bit overwhelming, but they're not as bad as they seem." As they walked up the steps, Ethan could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses from within. The smell of roasted turkey and sweet cinnamon wafted through the air, mixing with the faint sound of Christmas carols playing in the background. He pushed open the grand door, and they were immediately greeted by the sight of elegantly dressed relatives mingling in the spacious foyer. "Ethan, there you are." Cynthia's voice boomed across the room, cutting through the festive chatter. The matriarch, dressed in a stunning red gown, rushed toward them, her expression a blend of warmth and concern. "You're late, dear. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about us." "Sorry, Grandma," Ethan replied, his tone apologetic. "I brought a friend." Cynthia's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Sophia's appearance, Her simple yet stylish outfit, a stark contrast to the sequin dresses and tailored suits of the other guests. "A friend, you say?" "Cynthia, this is Sophia," Ethan introduced, trying to keep the mood light. "She's a taxi driver, and I thought it would be nice to invite her to join us for dinner." "Taxi driver?" Cynthia echoed, her brow furrowing. "Ethan, this is a family gathering, not a charity event." Sophia shifted uncomfortably beside him, her confidence wavering under Cynthia's scrutinizing gaze. "I appreciate the invitation, Mrs. Collins. I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly, glancing at Ethan for support. "Nonsense," Cynthia exclaimed, her demeanor softening slightly. Come in. The more, the merrier." As they stepped into the grand living room, Sophia was awestruck by the opulence. The high ceilings were adorned with crystal chandeliers, and the walls were decorated with family portraits that seemed to watch over the festivities. A large, elegantly set dining table took center stage, glittering with fine china and sparkling silverware. Ethan led Sophia further into the room, where a group of relatives was gathered around the fireplace, exchanging stories and laughter. "This is my cousin, Alex," Ethan pointed out, gesturing toward a tall man with dark hair and a confident smile. "Nice to meet you," Alex said, extending a hand to Sophia. "What brings you to the Collins family gathering?" Sophia stammered, caught off guard. "Ethan invited me." "Ah, a charity case," Alex quipped, his tone playful but edged with condescension. Sophia felt herself flush, and she quickly glanced at Ethan for reassurance. "Alex, come on," Ethan interjected, a hint of irritation in his voice. "Sophia's here to enjoy Christmas with us. Let's keep it friendly." The tension hung in the air as Sophia forced a smile, determined not to let the comment get to her. She had faced far worse in her life than the dismissive remarks of wealthy relatives. "I'm just happy to be here," she stated, her voice steady. "Christmas is a special time, right?" Alex replied, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Nothing like a good holiday dinner to remind us of our blessings." Ethan shot his cousin a warning glance, sensing the undercurrents of judgment swirling around Sophia. He took her hand in his, a silent promise of support. "Let's get some drinks. I'll introduce you to the rest of the family." As they moved through the crowd, Sophia found herself increasingly overwhelmed by the atmosphere. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it all felt so foreign to her. She could see the joy on the faces around her, yet it felt like a world away from her reality. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, concern etching his features as he poured her a glass of punch. "Yeah, just a lot to take in," Sophia admitted, taking the drink and sipping it slowly. "Your family is lively," Ethan chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "You should see them at New Year's. It's like a full-on circus." Sophia smiled, the tension easing slightly. "I can imagine. It's nice to see everyone so happy, even if it's a little intimidating. Just remember, they're all human," Ethan said, his eyes serious. "They have their own struggles, even if it doesn't look like it. Just be yourself, and don't let their wealth make you feel lesser." As the dinner bell chimed, everyone began to gather around the table, and Ethan guided Sophia to her seat beside him. The dining room was beautifully decorated, with candles flickering softly and festive centerpieces adorning each table. Cynthia took her place at the head of the table, her presence instantly commanding respect. "Let's begin," she announced, her voice firm yet warm. "I hope you all remember the spirit of this season: gratitude, family, and love." Ethan watched as the others settled into their seats, the conversation quickly shifting to business and investments. The chatter flowed seamlessly, highlighting the latest trends and acquisitions, and it was clear that wealth was the common language among his relatives. Sophia, feeling out of place, tried to listen attentively, but the discussions felt alien to her. She cleared her throat, gathering her courage. "I may not know much about business, but I do know about hard work," she said, her voice rising above the din as a taxi driver. "Every day is a new challenge, but it's worth it to provide for my daughter." The table fell silent for a moment, surprise evident on several faces. Ethan's heart raced, proud of Sophia's bravery. "Is that so?" a distant cousin asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. But don't you think there's more to life than just working hard? Like, for example, making the right connections? Sophia met the woman's eyes, her expression steady. I believe that connections matter, but so does integrity. I choose to work for what I have, and I teach my daughter the same values. Ethan could see the tension rising as murmurs of disbelief and condescension swept through the table. He felt his stomach nodding, wishing he could shield Sophia from the judgment that was brewing. It's admirable, really, Cynthia interjected, attempting to break the tension. But one must also know how to navigate the world of opportunity. It's not just about working hard, it's about working smart. Sophia nodded, trying to keep her composure. I understand that, but I think there's a balance. Sometimes the simplest things, like family and kindness, are what truly matter. A few relatives exchanged glances, the conversations becoming more hushed, the air thick with unspoken judgments. Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the contrast between Sophia's authenticity and his family's superficiality glaringly apparent. As the dinner continued, Sophia felt the walls closing in. The laughter and chatter felt less welcoming, and the warmth she had initially felt was fading. She glanced at Ethan, who was engaged in a debate with his uncle about market trends. She quickly realized that she didn't belong here, and the sentiment crushed her spirit. "Ethan," she whispered, leaning closer, "maybe I should go. I don't want to disrupt anything." "No," he replied firmly, taking her hand under the table. "You're not disrupting anything. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." Taking a deep breath, Sophia found herself wanting to believe him. But the swirling conversations felt more like an avalanche, threatening to sweep her away. She could see the judgment in their eyes, the subtle smirks and dismissive glances. As the dinner progressed, Ethan continued to defend Sophia, but the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The contrast between their worlds felt more pronounced, and Sophia could sense the divide widening. Despite Ethan's efforts, the superficial values of his family were becoming clearer, and it was exhausting to navigate through it all. "Why don't we sneak away for a moment?" Ethan suggested, sensing Sophia's unease. "There's a kitchen in the back, and I could use a break from all this." Sophia smiled, grateful for his understanding. "I'd like that." They slipped away from the dining room, finding solace in the quiet of the kitchen. The room was warm and inviting, filled with the sense of spices and baked goods. A sense of relief. As the evening progressed inside Cynthia's opulent mansion, the laughter and chatter of the dinner party echoed through the grand hall. Ethan, feeling increasingly out of place amidst the superficiality of his family's conversations, often glanced toward Sophia, who sat at the far end of the long dining table, her vibrant spirit slightly dimmed by the weight of judgmental gazes. Despite the elegance surrounding them, a deep sense of connection had begun to form between them, one that contrasted starkly with the ostentation of the mansion. Ethan felt a magnetic pull towards Sophia's authenticity, a quality he found refreshing in a world dominated by wealth and status. He excused himself from a conversation about a recent stock market venture, his mind racing with thoughts of her. As he made his way toward the kitchen, he spotted Sophia quietly observing the chaotic scene, a faint smile gracing her lips as she listened to the laughter emanating from the dining room. "Sophia," Ethan said softly, stepping into the kitchen where the aromas of roasted turkey and spiced cider mingled in the air. "Do you want to escape this for a moment?" Her eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Absolutely. I could use a break from the festivities," she replied, a hint of sarcasm lacing her words. They slipped into the kitchen, where the atmosphere was much more relaxed, filled with the sounds of pots clanking and the warm glow of fairy lights strung above. The kitchen staff bustled about, preparing dishes for the evening, but in the corner, a small table was set up with leftover appetizers. Ethan grabbed a couple of breadsticks and offered one to Sophia. "Here, try this. They're not as fancy as what's out there, but they're definitely more real," he said, his tone light. Sophia laughed, taking a bite. "These are delicious. I'll take this over caviar any day." Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her with a warm smile. "You know, I've never met anyone like you. You bring a different energy to this place. Is that a compliment or a warning? She teased, raising an eyebrow. Definitely a compliment. You're refreshing, he replied, his voice earnest. I feel like I'm suffocating out there sometimes. It's all about appearances and status. I get that, she said, her eyes softening. It's easy to lose sight of what really matters when you're caught up in all this. I mean, look at them. She gestured toward the door leading back to the dining room. They're all so focused on their careers and their investments. What about happiness? Ethan nodded, reflecting on her words. You're right. It's like they think money can buy fulfillment. But, he trailed off, his thoughts spiraling. I don't even know what fulfillment looks like anymore. Sophia took a step closer, her expression sincere. Maybe it's about connection. Real connections, not the kind built on wealth or status. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Ethan felt a wave of understanding wash over him. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, yet here he was, finding more comfort in a few minutes with Sophia than in his entire life of luxury. I think you might be onto something, he said quietly. Suddenly, the door swung open and Cynthia appeared, her brow furrowed as she surveyed the scene. Ethan, what are you doing in here? She exclaimed, her voice tinged with concern. Just grabbing a snack, Grandma, he replied, trying to sound casual. Sophia was just... Sophia? Cynthia's eyes narrowed, and Ethan could see the wheels turning in her mind. You brought a taxi driver to our family dinner? What were you thinking? Sophia stiffened slightly at the unexpected scrutiny, but Ethan stepped forward, determined to defend her. She's not just a taxi driver, Grandma. She has a story. I'm sure she does, Cynthia interrupted, her tone dismissive. But this is a family gathering. We don't bring strangers into our home. Sophia's cheeks flushed, and Ethan could feel the tension rising. She's not a stranger to me. She's been a breath of fresh air in a world that's suffocating me, he said, his voice rising slightly with emotion. Cynthia's expression softened, if only for a moment. Ethan, you know we have expectations. Expectations that don't matter. He felt a surge of passion, his frustration boiling over. You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped in a life that's not yours. Sophia has shown me that there's more to life than what's on the surface. Cynthia crossed her arms, her posture rigid. It's not just about you, Ethan. This is our family's legacy at stake. Legacy? Sophia interjected, her voice steady despite the tension. What good is a legacy if it's built on unhappiness? I may not have wealth, but I have my daughter. And to me, that's what matters. The room fell silent as Cynthia processed Sophia's words, a flicker of realization crossing her face. Ethan seized the moment, stepping closer to Sophia, his heart racing. See? You're already making an impact, Sophia. You're showing them what really matters. Just then, a low murmur rippled through the dining room. Ethan turned to see several family members looking in their direction, eyes wide with curiosity and judgment. He felt the weight of their gazes bearing down on him, a palpable reminder of the societal divide that separated them all. A voice piped up from the dining room. What's going on in there? Are we having a family meeting without the family? Ethan sighed, glancing back at Sophia, who looked both apprehensive and resolute. Let's go back, he said, determination in his voice. We can't let them dictate our worth. Are you sure? She asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Absolutely, he replied, offering his hand. Together. As they stepped back into the dining room, the conversation shifted, and the air grew thick with anticipation. Ethan could sense the judgmental eyes of his relatives piercing through him, but he felt a renewed sense of strength with Sophia by his side. Everyone, he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. I want you to meet Sophia. She's a remarkable person, and I believe we could all learn something from her perspective. Somewhat taken aback, Cynthia crossed her arms defensively, her expression a mix of surprise and disapproval. Ethan, we don't need to share our family dinner with... But Sophia stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I'm not here to disrupt anything. I'm just here to remind everyone that there's more to life than what we possess or how we're perceived. Ethan watched as the room reacted to her words, some faces softening while others remained skeptical. It was clear that the tension had shifted, but the underlying issues were far from resolved. As Sophia continued to speak, Ethan felt a swell of pride. Her courage illuminated the room, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would open the door for honest conversations that had long been buried under layers of pretense. The night was far from over, and while the path ahead remained uncertain, Ethan knew that this was a pivotal moment, a chance to redefine what family meant and to embrace a new kind of connection, one rooted in authenticity and vulnerability. Ethan felt the air in the dining room thicken with tension as his cousin Alex stood up, his voice cutting through the din of holiday chatter. "Ethan, can we talk?" he asked, his tone a mix of concern and condescension. The room quieted, all eyes suddenly on the two men. "What is it, Alex?" Ethan replied, striving to maintain his composure. He could feel Sophia's gaze on him, a blend of curiosity and anxiety. She sat at the long table, gripping her fork tightly, her discomfort palpable. "Are you really going to bring a taxi driver into our family?" Alex's words dripped with disdain. "I mean, what are you thinking? This isn't just about you. It's about the legacy of the Collins family. You're throwing it away for what? A moment of rebellion?" Ethan's heart raced as he sensed the judgment in the eyes of his relatives. "Sophia is not just a taxi driver. She's a person, with dreams and struggles," he retorted, his voice louder than he intended. "You don't know anything about her. Then tell us," Alex challenged, crossing his arms. "What's so special about her? Does she even fit into our world?" Sophia's cheeks flushed a deep shade of crimson. She could have shrunk into her seat, but instead, she straightened her back, determined to speak. "I may not come from your world, but that doesn't make me any less deserving of respect," she said, her voice steady. "I work hard to provide for my daughter. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm not ashamed of my job." Ethan turned to her, admiration swelling in his chest. She was fierce, and he appreciated her bravery. "Exactly," he added, turning back to Alex. "She's resilient and strong, traits that matter far more than money or status." "You think this is about money?" Alex scoffed, his expression incredulous. "This is about family, about reputation. You're jeopardizing everything for a fleeting emotional connection." Sophia lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of those words. She wanted to leave, to escape the judgment that felt like a heavy blanket suffocating her spirit. But Ethan reached for her hand under the table, his warmth igniting a flicker of hope within her. "Ethan, maybe we should just go," Sophia murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "No," he said firmly, squeezing her hand tighter. "You're not the problem here. I invited you, and you deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." Cynthia, observing the escalating confrontation, felt a pang of concern for both her grandson and the woman he had brought into their world. She cleared her throat, breaking the charged silence. "Alex, perhaps you should reconsider your words," she said gently but with authority. "We all come from different backgrounds. Isn't that what makes our family diverse?" "Diverse?" Alex laughed sarcastically. "More like a circus. We can't just let anyone waltz in and disrupt our traditions." "What's next? Inviting the whole neighborhood?" Ethan's frustration peaked. "You know what? Maybe it is time for some disruption," he countered, his voice rising. "This family has been stuck in its ways for too long. Sophia shows me a different perspective, one where connection means more than status." The room was silent, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Cynthia, sensing the need for resolution, stood up. "Enough," she commanded, her voice steady but laced with an undeniable vulnerability. "Let's hear Sophia's story. She deserves that much." Sophia looked up, surprised. You don't have to if you don't want to," Ethan said softly, his eyes encouraging her. "No, I'll share," she replied, taking a deep breath. "I'm a single mother. My daughter is my everything. I've faced challenges that I never imagined I would have to. My job as a taxi driver is not glamorous, but it allows me to provide for her. I work long hours, often through the night, to ensure she has what she needs." Christmas is special to us because it's a time to be together, to laugh, and to dream. Ethan watched as Sophia spoke, her voice steady and filled with passion. The room listened, some with skepticism, others with intrigue. I may not have the privileges you do, but I know the value of family and love. I understand struggles in ways that wealth can't buy. Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at the others. Okay, but... he began, his bravado faltering. It's just different. It is different, Sophia affirmed. But different doesn't mean less valuable. It means we all have unique stories that shape who we are. Cynthia stepped forward, her expression softening. Sophia, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's important for our family to remember that we all have our battles. Sometimes, we forget that wealth doesn't equate to happiness. Ethan looked at his grandmother, admiration flooding his heart. Exactly, Grandma. We're all human, and we all deserve to be heard. Just because someone doesn't fit our mold doesn't mean they don't belong. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly, some relatives nodding in agreement while others remained skeptical. Yet, in that moment, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this Christmas Eve could be the start of something different, something meaningful. As the conversation began to shift, Alex's demeanor softened. Maybe I was too harsh, he admitted begrudgingly. It's just, I worry about you, Ethan. I don't want you to make a mistake that could haunt you. Ethan nodded slowly, appreciating the concern even if he didn't agree with the delivery. I appreciate that, Alex. But this isn't a mistake to me. Sophia is important to me. Sophia felt a swell of gratitude and affection for Ethan. His support in the face of scrutiny meant the world to her. In that moment, she realized how rare it was to find someone who valued her for who she was, not for what she had or lacked. Thank you, she whispered to him, her heart racing. I didn't expect this tonight. Ethan smiled, the warmth of her gratitude igniting a spark within him. Neither did I, but I'm glad you're here. Cynthia, sensing the tension had eased slightly, decided to share her own experiences. You know, there was a time in my life when I faced judgment from my family too, she began, her voice calm yet reflective. I made choices that weren't always accepted. I learned that love and acceptance come from understanding each other's journeys. The table fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Cynthia, curious about the stories she had kept hidden for so long. Sophia felt a connection forming, a bridge being built among them all, as the night unfolded with unexpected revelations. As the conversations flowed, Ethan glanced at Sophia, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and affection. She had faced the storm with grace, and he admired her for it. Perhaps, just perhaps, this Christmas Eve would mark the beginning of something beautiful, not just for them, but for the entire Collins family. It was a testament to the power of connection, a reminder that beneath the surface of wealth and status, there was a profound need for understanding and love. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Laughter mingled with the aroma of holiday dishes, and the shadows of doubt and judgment began to fade. Ethan felt a sense of unity forming, a fragile yet hopeful thread weaving through the fabric of their family. Yet, he knew that challenges still lay ahead. Would they embrace this new perspective? Would they allow the spirit of Christmas to heal their divides? He took a deep breath, ready to see where the night would lead them, hopeful for the future that lay beyond the confines of their expectations. As the tension hung thick in the air, Cynthia Collins, the matriarch of the family, stood up slowly, her gaze sweeping across the table, where a mixture of disbelief and indignation marred the faces of her relatives. The clattering of cutlery and half-eaten plates momentarily ceased as she cleared her throat, a signal that commanded attention. The room fell silent, all eyes on her as she lifted her glass, its crystal glinting under the soft glow of the chandelier. Family, Cynthia began, her voice steady yet warm. Tonight, we gather to celebrate a holiday that, above all else, embodies love, forgiveness, and the spirit of togetherness. I propose a toast, not just to the fortunes we have amassed, but to the bonds we share and the love that we often take for granted. She raised her glass higher, and the others followed suit, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Ethan stood beside Sophia, feeling the weight of his grandmother's words. He turned to her, noticing the flicker of hope in her eyes. "This is what Christmas is about," he murmured gently, squeezing her hand. Sophia smiled, and in that moment, the room felt lighter. "Thank you, Cynthia," she said, her voice ringing with sincerity. "I'd like to share something too." She cleared her throat, drawing the attention of the guests once more. "As a taxi driver, I meet many people, but this Christmas means more to me than any other because it's not just about the presents or the decorations. It's about my daughter, Lily, and the dreams I have for her." A hush fell over the room as Sophia continued, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Last year, I struggled to make ends meet, working long hours to provide for her. But every night, I would tell her stories about the magic of Christmas, the joy of giving, the warmth of family, and how love can conquer all." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "This year, I finally saved enough to buy her a small gift, something she's wanted for a long time. But what I realized is that the best gift I can give her is my time, my love, and the belief that no matter how hard life gets, we can always find hope in each other." The guests exchanged glances, some visibly moved by her heartfelt account. Ethan felt a swell of admiration for Sophia, her words resonating deeply within him. It was a stark contrast to the superficial conversations that had dominated the evening. Cynthia nodded appreciatively, a smile forming on her lips. "Beautifully said, Sophia," Cynthia replied. "You remind us all of what truly matters. Let us not focus merely on our status or our wealth, but on the connections we forge and the lives we touch." As the evening progressed, a subtle transformation began to ripple through the Collins family. Conversations shifted, and laughter bubbled up in unexpected places. Ethan and Sophia found themselves gravitating towards one another, sharing glances that spoke volumes. The more they conversed, the more the barriers between their worlds seemed to dissolve. "Did you ever think you'd be here?" Ethan asked, his voice low, as they stood somewhat apart from the table, watching the animated discussions unfold. "At a Collins Christmas dinner?" Sophia chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Not in a million years. I mean, look at this place. It's like something out of a movie." She gestured to the lavish decorations and the elegantly dressed guests. "I feel like I'm in a fairy tale." Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that filled the space between them. "You fit in perfectly, you know. More than most of my family, to be honest." He glanced back toward the table, where his relatives were deep in conversation about investment portfolios. "They can be, well, let's just say they're not always the most genuine." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what about you? Do you feel like you fit in?" He hesitated for a moment, the question hanging in the air. "I used to think so," Ethan finally replied, "but I've been feeling more like an outsider lately. Maybe that's why I invited you tonight. You see things differently. You remind me of what's important." The warmth of their connection enveloped them, and amidst the clamor of the dinner party, they found solace in each other's presence. The atmosphere had shifted, and the spirit of Christmas, one of unity, authenticity, and love, began to permeate the room. Just then, a sudden ringing of a phone shattered the moment. Sophia instinctively reached for her bag, her heart racing as she fumbled for her phone. She glanced at the screen, and her face blanched. "Oh no, it's Lily's school." Ethan's expression faltered, sensing the urgency in her tone. "What's wrong?" Sophia bit her lip, her fingers trembling as she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. After a brief exchange, her eyes widened, and she turned to Ethan, her expression a mixture of fear and concern. "It's Lily. She's not feeling well. They think she might have a fever." Without missing a beat, Ethan stepped closer, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of her emotions. "We should go to her," he urged. "I can drive you." Sophia shook her head, torn between her responsibilities and the warmth of the evening. "But I can't just leave." "Hey," he interrupted gently, tilting her chin up so their eyes met. "Your daughter needs you. I'll be right there with you." "That's what matters." The sincerity in his gaze melted away her hesitation. "You're right," she said, her voice steadier now. "I have to go." As they hurried out of the mansion, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses faded behind them. The winter night greeted them with a brisk chill, but the warmth of their connection lingered. They stepped into the car, and Ethan turned the ignition, his heart racing with the urgency of the moment. "Hold on tight, Sophia," he said, determination in his voice. "We're going to get to Lily as fast as we can." As they sped through the city, the lights blurred by like stars shooting across the night sky. Sophia felt a rush of gratitude for Ethan's support, his presence a comforting balm against her worries. She knew that, despite the unexpected turn of events, she wasn't alone. In that moment, the true spirit of Christmas shone brightly: love, connection, and the unwavering strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night was far from over, and as they raced towards her daughter, Sophia held on to the hope that the magic of the holiday would extend beyond the mansion walls and envelop them all, no matter where their paths might lead. As the Christmas festivities continued to unfold within the ornate walls of Cinch's mansion, the atmosphere darkened for Sophia Bombs as her phone buzzed with an urgent notification. The brief glimpse at the screen revealed her daughter's name, and a wave of anxiety washed over her. She glanced at Ethan, who was engaged in conversation with his family, oblivious to the storm brewing within her. Her heart raced as she processed the implications of the message. Ethan's laughter echoed in her ears, but it felt distant now. She could almost hear the faint voice of her daughter, the soft giggles that filled their small apartment, now replaced by an unsettling silence. Unable to shake the worry, she slipped away from the table, seeking refuge in the quiet of the hallway. The opulence of the mansion felt stifling, a gilded cage that contrasted sharply with her modest life. Ethan, noticing her absence, excused himself and followed her. "Sophia," he called softly, finding her standing by a window, staring out into the night. Her brow was furrowed, and her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her phone. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched across his handsome features. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's my daughter. She's not feeling well. I need to get to her." The words tumbled out, heavy with urgency and fear. Ethan's heart sank at the distress in her voice. Without a second thought, he took her hand in his. "Let's go. I'll drive you." Sophia hesitated for just a moment, the weight of the family dinner pulling at her, but the thought of her daughter alone and unwell pushed her forward. "Thank you," she whispered, gratitude and desperation mingling in her tone. They hurried out of the mansion and into the chill of the Christmas Eve air. The city lights twinkled like stars against the dark sky, but Sophia only had eyes for the road ahead, her mind racing with thoughts of her daughter. Ethan opened the door to his sleek car, and they climbed in, the warmth of the interior a stark contrast to the cold outside. As he drove, the city whizzed by, but their conversation remained hushed, filled with an unspoken understanding. Sophia's anxiety cast a shadow over their bond, but Ethan's presence provided a flicker of comfort. He glanced over at her, catching her lost expression. "She'll be okay," he reassured her gently. "Let's just get there." "I hope so," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's my everything." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Family is everything," he echoed, the truth resonating deeply within him as he reflected on his own family dynamics, the pressure and expectations they carried. As they approached Sophia's modest apartment building, a sense of urgency filled the vehicle. Ethan parked quickly and they rushed inside, Sophia's heart pounding in sync with her footsteps. The dimly lit hallway felt familiar yet foreign, a world away from the luxury they had just left behind. Sophia fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking as she finally managed to unlock the door. "Please let her be okay," she pleaded silently as they stepped inside. The cozy living room was a stark contrast to the mansion, filled with homemade decorations and the remnants of a small festive gathering. A half-eaten plate of cookies and a colorful drawing on the fridge. "Mama!" A small voice called from the bedroom, a sound that sent a wave of relief crashing over Sophia. "Annie!" she shouted, rushing toward the sound. Ethan followed closely, his heart swelling at the sight of the little girl nestled in bed, her cheeks flushed but her smile bright. "Mama, I'm okay," Annie exclaimed, sitting up and beaming at her mother. "I just had a little fever. Miss Clara made me soup." Sophia knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Oh, sweetheart, I was so worried." Tears of relief filled her eyes as she hugged Annie tightly. Ethan stood back, watching the reunion unfold before him. The warmth of the moment enveloped him, and he felt a pull in his heart. He had spent so much time chasing wealth and status, yet here was a genuine connection, a bond that transcended materialism. "Mr. Collins," Annie exclaimed, noticing Ethan for the first time. "Are you here to see my mama?" Ethan knelt beside them, his eyes sparkling with kindness. "I am, Annie. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Your mom's been very brave." Annie giggled. "I'm brave like her. She says I'm a superhero." Sophia chuckled, wiping her tears. "That's right. And you know what? Superheroes always have friends to help them. Like you, Mr. Collins?" Annie asked innocently, her gaze curious as she tilted her head. Ethan smiled warmly, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. "Exactly like me, Annie. We all help each other out, especially during Christmas." Just then, a knock interrupted their moment. The door swung open to reveal Cynthia, Ethan's grandmother, her expression a mixture of concern and surprise. "I followed you," she admitted, stepping inside. "I wanted to make sure everything was all right." Sophia stood, her heart racing again, unsure of what to expect from the formidable matriarch. "Cynthia, Shoo," Cynthia interrupted, holding up a hand. "I can see you're fine, dear." She approached Annie, who was still perched on the edge of her bed, eyes wide with curiosity. "And who is this little lady?" "This is my daughter, Annie," Sophia introduced, her voice steadying as she felt Cynthia's warmth. "Annie, this is Mr. Collins' grandmother." "Hi," Annie chirped, her innocence disarming. "Do you want to see my drawings?" Cynthia's stern demeanor softened as she knelt beside the little girl. "I would love to, sweetheart." As Annie excitedly showed Cynthia her artwork, Ethan stepped closer to Sophia, a smile playing on his lips. "I didn't expect my grandmother to come here." "Neither did I," Sophia admitted, glancing at Cynthia. "But it's nice to see her here." Cynthia turned back to them, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "Family is important, especially at Christmas. We must take care of one another, no matter the circumstances." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her heart at the unexpected kindness from Cynthia. "Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate your support." "Of course, dear," Cynthia replied, her voice gentle. "Annie, would you like to bake some cookies with me? I have a special recipe." "Yay," Annie squealed, jumping out of bed. "Can we make the icing pink?" "Absolutely," Cynthia laughed, leading the eager girl into the kitchen. Ethan and Sophia exchanged glances, their hearts swelling as they witnessed the unlikely bond forming between their families. "You know," Ethan said softly, "this has turned into a Christmas I never expected." Sophia smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't anticipated. "Me too." As they stepped into the kitchen, the air filled with laughter and the sweet smell of cookies baking, Ethan realized that true wealth lay not in the possessions he accumulated, but in the connections he nurtured. In that moment, amidst flower dust and holiday cheer, the spirit of Christmas surrounded them all, binding the two families together in a tapestry of love, joy, and hope for the future.